All right, Ms. Jocelyn, go ahead.
Good evening. Welcome to pauseforthetruth.com. So, if you're looking at your watch, you're probably saying, "What happened? They're a little late tonight." Okay, I'll admit it was my fault. As we plan our day, we think about all the things that we want to do that day. And of course, as time slips us by, then we remember what we didn't do. And then all of a sudden, we try to do it all at the same time. Guilty, that's me today. But I am Jocelyn Turner. Welcome to Pause for the Truth. What we are here to tell you what's really going on. Of course, I cannot do this alone. And we have tonight not only Dr. Rogers Kane, but our behind the scenes, who is in front of the camera now, technology guru Tyrone Jackson. How are you doing, Dr. Kane and Tyrone?
I'm
Doing
doing
awesome.
fine. I'm doing fine. I was going to be the gentleman and take the hit by being late, but you beat me to the punch.
Well, and I like to try to acknowledge it though, as Tyrone so gently reminds us that we need to get on at 6:20. So I was severely late, and I am most appreciative of our devoted listeners who tune into the show every week. And I wanted to apologize to them because we do like to be respectful of everyone's time.
we
Tyrone, how
try,
are you doing this
we try
evening?
not to be CP, but go ahead.
Well, I am doing awesome. Thank you for asking, Miss Jocelyn. And you've been on time or before time so many episodes before, so we're going to give you a pass today.
I appreciate it. I don't know if you noticed me turning my camera because I want to make sure you see what's behind me on the wall. And I know we have some Gator haters, so but anyway, I just have to float in my Florida Gator sign. So tonight is an interesting topic, and I have to I won't say blame. I have to acknowledge Tyrone because this is a topic that's been on his mind. We like to we the three of us actually talk and decide what we're going to talk about at on each show, but we also talk to people within our circle and say, what are some things that we need to talk about? And so tonight's topic is making the parent-child relationship work in troubled times. And we're hoping that our guests, our invited guests, will be able to join us. Again, we know that life comes up and life happens. So we're gonna try to wing it, right? Tyrone and Dr. Kane.
Absolutely.
Well, I can
So
But
tell you after 45 episodes, it's not going to be a lot of winging it involved. It is, we've
either we
gone,
know what we're doing or we don't, right?
absolutely, absolutely.
well,
So Tyrone,
needless to say, even though I'm a parent, I'm an old parent, and I'm more of a grandparent these days, with as far as the younger folks are concerned. So Tyrone is going to have a whole lot on his shoulder in terms of the generation right behind us,
yeah, and then
because
I'll give my disclaimer that I don't have any children, so I really am going to lean on you. But as someone often said, I'm a child. You have you have nieces, nephews, godchildren. All your friends, and family have children, so it's okay. But Tyrone, I want to start with you and ask you, why was this topic important to you?
Well, I've had an opportunity to talk to friends, family, and one of the things that we continue to go back to is the difference in parenting styles from when we were being raised and the way we see children being raised today in conjunction with how we made choices to raise our children. And it's always a spirited conversation. So I submitted that to you and Dr. Kane, and to my benefit, you guys accepted it as a subject, and it's something that I think a lot of people are interested in having a stern conversation about.
Yeah, and I can recall, to be honest with you, Dr. Kane made the comment before I go back on what I can recall, but I wanted to touch bases with to a point Dr. Kane made because I see my friends and family acting totally different with their grandchildren than they did with their children. Dr. Kane, are you guilty of that?
absolutely 100%. My wife was quick to say that I did more child care and babysitting with my grandchildren than I did with my own kids. And and there's various reasons for that. There's some anything from societal reasons, as well as, believe it or not, there is a medical, psychological reasons behind it, which I won't get into. That's one of those subject matters we can talk about later. But and she's absolutely correct. My daughter say, hey, when the kids were, 2, 3, 5, whatever. He said, Dad, can you keep can you keep the kids? I'm going out with so and so and so. I say, yeah, fine. But the mom, her mom was the one that kept the kids when we were younger. Part of it was because I was doing a lot of work and stuff. But I mean, they can jump all over me, and they can step on me, they can do whatever they wanted to at that time. And I did not complain. When my own kids doing it's like, hey, you're breaking my back. You're stepping in places you shouldn't be stepping.
So,
but I just think we keep on kicking right now.
what makes now so different though? What are the troubled times that we were referring to, or Tyrone, that you're referring to? I'm sorry, I'm not going to put it all on you. What are the troubled times now when it comes to parenting than before? What's so different today than before when it comes to parenting children?
Now, my thoughts along this is these here newly socially imposed ideas. All right. Well, there was a time, let's be honest, there was a time when disciplining your child had the extent of not only verbal but physical punishment in the way of, we call it paddling, some call it getting a whipping, some call it getting a beating. But those items and those methods were allowed. All right. And if a neighbor saw a parent doing that, they felt comfortable that the parent was doing that for proper cause. But today in society, let someone, an outsider, see a parent discipline their child. They feel the right now to contact the authorities. We have made it so that society has said that children who feel, for whatever reason, that they are being unduly punished can call the authorities.
Children have rights too.
Well, that's what society has told us. But let's be honest. Let's be honest. Children at the young age are developing their understanding of rights. Show me a child that hasn't lied, stretched the truth, or changed things to fit their behavior or their advantage, then and that's where that's where the whole crux come from.
Well, Tyrone, you mentioned a point, in terms of, a parent disciplining a child whenever they saw the need to discipline. And that was quite fervent. That was quite uh,
Commonplace.
yeah. You saw quite a bit during my generation. In fact, it was at the point that the parents kind of gave the neighbors, because it takes a village to raise a child type approach to things, that the parents gave neighbors the latitude to discipline their children. And
Yeah.
then, because I can recall if I did something I had no business that was obvious, contrary to what my parents felt was right and did not feel was right, but was witnessed by a neighbor and not my parent. Those neighbors, at a certain age would take and discipline us. And, whether it was a paddling or whatever you call it. And then when my parents got home, the neighbors would tell them, and my parents would turn around and do the same thing. So, now I didn't turn out that bad. How bad, is that? I'll be honest with you, raising my kids, and mostly girls, one boy, I only had to usually discipline them by the time they got to 3 or 4. I didn't have to do anything after that because they just feared what I would do.
Yes.
Okay. So I guess what they say, the fear of God was in them. Not like I was God, but the fear of God was in them as to what I would do, as well as they were afraid of the disappointment that I might express in terms of their behavior, because I talked to them and let them know, And then lastly, and in fairness to her, mom was a disciplinarian at that age. She was quick to ready to take that whip out, not a real whip, but to take and discipline them physically. But most of the time, all she had to do was say, "I'm telling you, Dad," and it was squashed.
So I want to get back to something Tyrone said, because I'm going to mention something to you that you all may or may not be aware of. And that is the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child.
Right.
And it is an international human rights treaty which sets out the civil, political, economic, social, health, and cultural rights of children. The convention defines a child as any human being under the age of 18, unless the age of majority is attained earlier under national legislation. Nations that have ratified this convention or have acceded to it are bound by international law. So guess what nation has not ratified the rights of the child? Take a guess, Dr. Kane.
The United States.
Bingo. Largely due to what Tyrone said. A lot of, Americans, if we have not discovered anything during the pandemic, Americans have voiced what rights they have. They have the right to get vaccinated. They have the right to bear arms. We will state our rights when it is important to us. But Dr. Kane and Tyrone, I got to assert. But when it comes to the right for a woman to decide what happens to her body, that's when the buck stops there. But that's another show. I won't go there.
Well,
so, Tyrone, I wanted to mention, though, that internationally, there are people who believe that children do have a right.
Well, the one thing I would say this before time is, granted, we as a nation feel we got we're a nation of rights, but people misinterpret what a right is. Okay, they interpret it as they see it beneficial to them. Okay, the right to bear arms. They take that Second Amendment and they twist it and turn it any kind of way they want to make it fit their narrative. The right for the rights of an unborn child. Since you mentioned it, it supersedes the right of the mother, and it's like, how did that ever come a play? I don't get that. I can't fathom that. Not saying I'm pro or anti-abortion, but I mean some things are just plain common sense, and that is, what's the rights of an unborn child? When do they become a child? If you want to ask some of that, so I don't know. Misinterpretation of right, as one of our listeners said, is exactly what we hear and what we see. Tyrone?
Well, here, Ms. Johnson, I don't want to get to what you were saying, and it is very important that we understand that the method for raising children is not a documented fact. All right, there is nowhere you can go to get the precise prescription or description of how to raise a child.
A universal description. One size fits all.
So, but here's the thing about rights with regards to children. If you allow children to have a wide berth of rights, then it requires, as a parent, that you have a great deal of time to guide them to understanding those rights. But when you look at America, our parents are spending less and less time with their children, giving their children more and more rights, which lead the children, therefore, to a greater confusion over what and how to exercise their rights.
What is right?
Or what is right, absolutely. So if we want to have our children to exercise and to enjoy the rights that society is making available, then we as parents also have to make the time to be with them and guide them through understanding how to utilize and what each of those rights are and what they mean.
Especially the last part, two part. What is your right? What is a right? You got to teach them. It's not like they were born with the knowledge of what's right, what's wrong. You have to teach them what's right, what's wrong. And while you're doing that, you teach them their right as an individual, as a human being, and that those rights are earned. Some are given to them, and that's the right to live and not be killed. That's
Absolutely.
some of the automatic. Everybody knows the automatic rights given to them. But again, within within societal norms, you have to teach those kids what are the societal norms, especially in the society in which you are living. So a universal, as you said, Tyrone, there is no universal plan. There's no universal one size fit all mechanism or methods by which to raise a child. Okay. It is very societal, and each society has to help determine what is right within their society. We have no business trying to tell the New Guinea tribes, where it may be, what's right in terms of raising their child. They have a right to watch TV. That tribe may say, "Well, what the hell is a TV?" You know, that
So,
kind of.
so how do you, looking at our topic though tonight, how do you make the parent-child relationship work in today's society, knowing all the competing things that people have? Children want, we all, not just children, adults, we want what we want, when we want it, how we want it. And some parents have, they were without a lot when they were growing up, and so then they've given their children above and beyond what they may have needed, but they gave the children what they thought that they should have. And so then, unfortunately, in some instances, that's when, as the children age and the demands start to increase, then and the parents are no longer able to give, or either they feel that they've created, I won't say a monster, but a selfish child. But and with social media, we know all that happens on social media. So how do you work the parent child? How do you make the parent child relationship work in today's society?
I will. Let me just say this real quick. I think you hit a key point, Ms. Turner, and that is what you need versus what you demand. Those kids, what they demand is maybe totally different, totally obscure in terms of what they need. The parents need to decide, have to decide what that child really needs to grow and become a responsible adult that can raise their own children, pass on the knowledge that that parent gave them. If that parent, for whatever reason, is not taking, as Tyrone said, is not taking the time out to help educate their kids, i.e., become involved in their lives, listen to them, take time out for that kid to help educate them, then that kid can easily be misdirected by other influences, whether it's another child, whether it's the wrong adults, whatever it may be that may be contrary to your social norms or that parent's social norm. So, I mean, it's very conflicting.
Where
Go
there
ahead, Tyrone.
are there are some basic fundamentals that each human needs for growth in society. All right. And one of them is love and affection. So your question and the answer to your question is simply a few things, Miss Jocelyn. Every child needs to feel loved. All right. They need to feel a part of the family unit. All right. Each child needs to feel a relationship bond with their parents, because this then transcends into relationship skills with other individuals in society. Each child and each parent should work to create education and learning in their child. What I'm saying is not only is it our responsibility to teach our children the stove is hot, do not touch it,
Yeah.
but to teach them the skills necessary to be a productive citizen in society. These are translate into life skills. The next thing is behavior management. One of the challenges of a child is, Dr. Kane alluded to it, was the desire to have what they want, and their want is predicated on what makes them feel good. Well, what always makes you feel good as we get later on in life, we know is not always good for you. So we have to help them with behavior management. We all grew up with, there's a time and a place for everything. All right. I don't know about you guys, but my mother told me, if you embarrass me, then I will embarrass you. That's just the way it's going to be.
Yep.
And the fear of what would happen if I embarrassed her was enough to curtail my behavior. Now, that created a repetitive pattern that made it possible for me to later on in life understand time and place for everything. So it is about major important necessities for existing in society, which is one of which are the important pillars of what the parent-child relationship should be about.
And you know, a lot of kids, when you say what kids look to be loved, and kids also um, uh, want to be viewed as being normal within society. If society publishes being normal is having a mother and a father, and then we get into a little bit, a little bit more into some things. If what's considered to be normal is mother and father in a household, okay, as a household, but then you have so many one parent families, okay, well, either the father is missing, and sometimes these days the mother is missing, then that child may not see themselves in the normality that's being presented to them by the rest of society as having a household that has a mom and a dad within the household. And that plays a huge influence on some of the children's behavior.
Yeah, and there's a comment, while the generalities are appreciated, it is important to recognize that parents, for many different reasons, are not equipped to truly educate their children. This is creating multi-generational deficiencies in life skills.
Yes.
The village is important in assessing and supporting. That's why I said in the very beginning, although I am not I don't have any biological children, my family and friends have said that I have been an influence positively, hopefully, in their children's lives. So I agree. And thank you, Dr. Barbell Johnson, for the comment, because we do know that it does take a village. But, I think about, it is troubling times, though. I mean, I just left the grocery store and I can't tell you the number of items I purchased and how much I spent. So I can only imagine the troubled times that parents are in when it comes to buying basic needs, while also competing with the things that their children want and are not able to do. When it's time to go back to school, for example, are they going to be able to afford those things? And see, that's where the village comes in, because there are numerous organizations. I'm reminded of some folks that I've worked with, of course, at the Partnership for Child Health here in Jacksonville, the Center for Child Rights, Family Support Services, of course, the Florida Department of Children and Families. There are numerous organizations, Journey into Womanhood. I mean, I can go on and on and on about some great organizations that offer, my colleagues, they have some healing circles for mothers who've had some troubling times. We've had some folks on in the past talking about juvenile crime and really gangs. And so parents have so much to deal with, and some in some instances, I know when I've talked to my colleagues and our guest on, when we talked about gang prevention and all, some parents are dealing with an area that they've never had to deal with. It's not something that they dealt with, that they were involved in when they were younger. And so there are some troubling times for some parents. And I think what we have to remember, because trouble is not within our family, it doesn't mean that it's not in our community. And so as a community, how do we come together to address those troubling times?
Well, let
You
me
know,
say
Miss
this
Turner,
here, before
go
we
ahead.
go to that, Ms. Johnson. Let me say this here. It is important that we understand that troubling times for our community is not new.
Nope.
Mhm.
All right. So today, parents have greater opportunity for financial stability than our parents did. And so I say that to say that there are true cases where we have to be cognizant of the fact that there are struggling individuals. But we also want to be careful not to blanket that and give that as a living excuse. To parent is to be involved. To parent is to be there. Okay. And if you are unable to supply all the basic necessities and you are there, then it is proven that your child still has a better opportunity in society than to not. I've very seldom have I ever heard someone tell me that we grew up eating everything we wanted, had all the food we wanted, all the clothes we wanted, we could do everything that we want. Very seldom do I hear that. But I can count countless times where I hear them recanting hot dog summers. You know what I'm saying? Where every day it was hot dogs. I can remember them telling how, there was limited food, but the time they spent with their friends and their family and their parents carried them through that. It made them appreciate not having, and it made them work harder once they got to the point where they could have, not to go back to that point.
Well, let me say, I am a product of I'm gonna say a broken home in the fact that at some point father was not in the home. Okay, I am a product of that. My mom had 8 kids. Okay, and at a certain age, my dad was not there for one reason or another. Okay, um, and so she basically became the principal provider in that household, monetarily as well as psychologically, socially, everything that we needed from that social standpoint. My dad didn't come back around until much later in life when a lot of us was pretty much grown and he realized what was going on. But my mom had to take the brunt of that in terms of raising kids, working 2 jobs, still trying to make sure the homework is done, the food is on the table, and did not have resources, Ms. Turner, like, and what made me talk about this is the resources that you mentioned
That
that
you
are
mentioned.
available to some parents today. You know, a lot more resources out there. And one of the things that, as Black folks always say a lot of times, sometimes we don't know what's out there. It's almost like it's a secret, and we don't know how to go about getting help and so on and so on. But at that point, there was nothing out there that we knew of, other than I think maybe you did the we call it welfare in terms of food being available. And if you made $1 more, which my mom did, then what the guidelines were, you did not get free food or anything, free lunch. None of that stuff was available. So as a and that's the reason I brought up about a what's considered norm. A lot of our friends had the mom and the dad in the household. We thought those were great households. and then we have to take the brunt of. Sometimes people pick at you or whatever they may want to do about your father not being around. And so I know a lot of kids out there these days that may have to contend with that. And with social media, it can really get nasty as to what you have and don't have being publicized in the general, um, being presented to all your friends and people that at school, friends at school, classmates, whatever. Luckily, we can only have to hear about something, around the block, around the corner, dealing with the immediate friends we had. Nothing like social media that can put all your business out there in the street.
Well, Miss Johnson, let me ask you this here question.
Uh-oh.
In my belief, there are two opposing theories to raising a child with plenty and raising a child with meager or minor means. As you looked at friends, families, and others, which one would you say has been more successful?
No names.
The ones, I mean, I can even talk about myself. I didn't grow up with a lot, but I think the main thing that my parents stressed with us is the importance of education. And if you have education, you can get almost anything that you want, as long as you're going to work for it, right? Obviously it's not going to be handed to you, but you get educated. One thing about it, when you get educated, as you know, with all the stuff behind me on the wall, I attended the University of Florida. And I can say that had I not gone there, gotten out of Jacksonville, obviously there are things I was exposed to by going away to college than had I not gone. Now, does it mean that anybody who chose not to go to college, had their life was any less than mine? No, it does not mean that. I'm just talking about from my experiences. So I think that, education does help. A couple of weeks ago, last week we talked about even reading, the things that you have your child involved in during the summer months, for example. And the point is, and I think I made a comment and somebody else may have, that the importance of reading and how reading takes you places sometimes that you may never go. So I think, those are the things that we need to make sure that we stay focused on, making sure, just telling parents, check with the guidance counselors in school, go online, find out. Dr. Mosley said last week the importance of going to the library, because the library has so many resources that we may not know about. And also, nonprofit organizations. There are a ton of nonprofit organizations in town that are doing some good things, because they know that there are some parents are hustling. They're trying to make ends meet, right? And so they would love to be able to do a ton of different things with their children. They just don't have the time. Take advantage of the resources that are available for your children. Fortunately, there are people who are able to provide resources and fund nonprofits so that they're able to offer free or reduced programs for families who might not afford it. I'd also like to mention, while I have the floor, is parents, don't forget to take time for yourselves, though. We know these are troubling times with, nowadays when you turn on the television, they're talking about a recession is right around the corner. It's going to happen in 2023. Find out from local resources, what can I do to not be bogged down by it? What are some practical things that I need to do today? Because I'm already, Tyrone, I'm already behind. I don't have the means. I'm already struggling, right, to support my family. If I know that a recession is coming, the struggle is going to get even worse for me and my family. What resources are available for me? And also de-stress. I mentioned about the healing circles that are available, that Selena Webster Bass does with the Voices Institute, as well as some other folks. And, I talked about the Center for Child Rights and some things that they do, Partnership for Child Health, where I work. There are some people doing some amazing things in the community. Learn what your local nonprofits are doing so that you can take advantage of those. So yeah, Tyrone, I mean, I don't know if I answered your question, but 5 minutes later, that's what I had.
Well,
That
I
was
think you
one
did.
focus
I
on
think
my
your
mind.
I think you hit on the point that I wanted to make. One is there are a multitude of resources now that were not always available in our communities. It's incumbent upon each parent who are having challenges to seek out those opportunities.
Mhm.
The next part, and the part that I wanted to actually go further into, was the fact and the understanding that having it all is not the solution.
Not at all.
Because with this here conversation, now Dr. Kane was humble enough and mentioned his beginning, and you've also mentioned yours, so it's only right that I mention mine. I came from a humble situation as well. My mother and father never got past high school, but it didn't stop them from instilling in us the opportunities for education. And here's what I saw I saw in them something I didn't want to have.
Mm.
And I was taught that if you don't want it, then these are the things that you do so that you don't have to. You go to school, you study, and you learn. The one thing, the beautiful thing that I remember most that was always said to me is education, it can't take it from you. We're living at that time, was living in a society where all of the things that we have as in the Black community now was not available. And I was constantly told that education, it can't take from you. And so that was the pillar that launched me and gave me opportunities when I went off to Kansas State University. Of course, not being from Florida like the two of you. But the whole point I was trying to make is simply this: as parents, and I sincerely hope young parents are listening, older parents are listening, the understanding and the belief that the solution to parenting is to give your children everything has never proven to be successful.
It never worked.
But to give your children an understanding of values of things like education continues to show and reap benefits. So, given the option as a parent, then it seems obvious to me that you would lean toward giving them what has shown to be successful.
I do want people to make sure, and this is a whole nother topic that we can get to later, but we that our generations, all you guys are the youngsters in this broadcast, but our generation was all about education, education, and they were looking for post high school education being a main approach to succeeding in life. And because they wanted to, the college degree and beyond college, whatever it may be. Um, there are there's some things that are going on these days that we have to examine at a later broadcast. We have to examine: do you need to go to college
Mm,
to
mm, mm.
fit the right education for the individual? We have to look at it because things have changed, especially when it comes to tuition and how much money and all that kind of stuff that people have to go pay to go off to college. And then when they get an education and whatever the field may be, not being able to find a job because of the technological advances and things that are occurring right now, we have to make sure our kids are cognizant and we stay stay woke, as they say, as to what's ongoing in terms of careers and being able to make it in life. We have to stay woke in terms of how we advise our kids in terms of what they can do, what's available to them, and how they will be able to succeed down the road. Not everybody, and we knew it back at that time, but we use a different phrase than what I'm about to say. Um, not everybody is college material.
Yes.
And we have to help guide those kids as to what may be best for them. It's still their choices when they get to a certain age. as to which direction they want to go. But you need to be able to readily be able to provide them the information to help them make that decision. People have come to me all the time. I want to be a doctor. I want to be a doctor. And I'm saying, okay, let's sit back and examine what it takes to be a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And do you really want to be after you find out everything that involves the monies, the time, you know, the
years of meaning. That's what you mean, the time. Mm-hmm.
right, and how much it takes away from your socialism. You being able to socialize with others. It takes away from a whole lot of communication with others, and even to some degree to your family. So let's, I sit back and I walk them through what it takes to be a physician, but I never make the decision for them. I don't try to discourage them, but I want them to know truly what they're getting into. And I think we need to do that for all of, in terms of post high school education. Make sure kids understand vocational. You look at right now, a lot of the jobs that are available are more vocational. The electrician,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
air conditioner guy, the auto mechanic, stuff that was available in my high school, that along with preparing you for being able to go to college. So you had many avenues that we were able to allow your kid to navigate, other than just going off to college, because not everybody is college material, but you need to prepare your kids whether they're college material. And I don't want to sound like it's all that, but and I just, it's a phrase or term I'm using. Not everybody is made to go off to college, even though it's a lot of fun. Sometimes that can get you in trouble.
Well, Miss Jocelyn, I thought of another thing that Dr. Kane said. We it is, there are so many negatives to social media, and they're easy to poke holes in. But let's also be honest and say that social media has created avenues of revenue beyond our generation understanding.
Yep.
An influencer
Mm-hmm.
with the right number of followers
Mm-hmm.
can make a very lucrative life for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I was growing up and video games had first started to get popular, and what the parents say, boy, get off of that video
Yeah.
game. You can't make a living with that. Well, there are young men and women today who are making 100,000 plus playing video games. There are some who win in excess of $50 to $75,000 for a tournament, with there being in excess of 20 to 50 tournaments per year. All right, so there are avenues that were not available for us that are also made out of in spite of the negatives of social media as well.
But Tyrone, you mentioned something. What we need to make sure, we also have to make sure that you are being responsible in terms of the avenue that you're taking. For instance, selling drugs was at one point was a quick, it and still is a quick way to make a dollar, but it may not be a permanent way by which you can sustain yourself.
Right.
Because it may
Somebody
be.
posted, I'm sorry, Dr. Kane. Somebody said, what are some favorite times with your parents that y'all can remember? You know what mine was?
What's that?
And I joked with one of my colleagues. I'll never forget it. When I was early on in my career, growing up in Jacksonville, I said one of my favorite times was when my parents my mom would pack up a picnic, lunch basically, picnic, sandwiches and chips, whatever the case may be. Very simple, not the elaborate things that some people take to the beach now. And we would literally drive to Jacksonville Beach. And I remember meeting one of my colleagues, and if I'll have to tease with her, she lived at the beach. And I told her, I said, girl, growing up in Jacksonville, going to Jacksonville Beach was like a field trip for us, for us and our family. And then it was when we also went to, I know another thing, when we made our own, we didn't have the fancy slip and slide. We just had a piece of plastic from from packaging, and we use the water hose. And those are some fun times for me. What about you all?
Tyrone,
Yeah,
you first.
I'll tell you, my mom and I are both very late birds. And I remember coming home late many of times, and my mom sitting in the kitchen, and her and I would sit there and talk for it seemed like hours, two,
Mm,
3 o'clock in the morning.
mm.
And the conversation was all over. It was an opportunity for me to ask her questions about things I didn't know about. And I always felt she gave me very candid and precise answers. And I can, if I close my eyes, I can even remember the feeling of just her and I. The entire house is asleep, and her and I are sitting at the old yellow kitchen table, and we're just laughing and talking, and those are my fondest memories.
That's very special. Very
I
special.
had a very similar experience in which instead of sitting at the kitchen table, once or twice a week, I would have to take my mom. She sit between my legs, and I part her hair. I put old
Wow.
soap for eight and grease her hair. Row by row, I would grease her hair, and we would have a conversation during that whole process. She did that on a regular basis. Also, just something as simple as because it was really a treat to us going to what was at that time was a burger place, Royal Castle, uh,
Raw.
which is equivalent to the Crystals, and it was before McDonald's. Later, McDonald's came along, but Royal Castle was a local burger place. Or going to the movies as a family, something that
Drive through.
drive through at that. You couldn't
Oh yeah.
afford. I
Drive
mean,
in. I'm sorry. Drive in. Drive
yeah,
in.
yeah, I'm sorry, drive in. Yeah, and I mean a movie. One of the first couple of movies we saw at drive in, and then later in actually inside a building. The first movie I remember seeing was The Pink Panther with Peter Sellers. The next movie would have been, and when it was quite a few because my mom was a cowboy fan. Most of Clint Eastwood's movie, The Good, the Bad, the Ugly,
Mm.
and so on and so on. Those were great times for me because we did not, as a family, could not afford much. But to get a treat like that was truly inspiring as to I'd like to be able to afford to do that someday.
And
So let me ask you all. I'm
mine was
sorry.
mine was Into the Dragon with Bruce Lee. Oh my
Oh,
goodness.
I was grown by that time, but go ahead.
I
Not
was going to say
grown,
you
but
were 10 years young.
old.
So I'm gonna take a different stand with you all. So next Sunday is Father's Day. And when we talk about making the parent-child relationship work, what are your advice to young fathers, as they are navigating their role as a parent?
Well,
Crickets.
I'll say this here. Um, Fathers who stay have a more difficult time than most people will ever give credit for, because the father who is there has a very challenging role. And if you're fortunate enough to have a spouse, wife, or partner who does a great deal of the work, it even more. So my wife, I was blessed that my wife did the primary raising. I was the fear factor. I was the when daddy come home. so and so that was the role that I played. What I would say to young fathers today is that one, it gets better. Two, that the beauty is in watching your children grow to be good men and women in society. The beauty for me has been the conversations I've had with my sons and my daughter about things that I've struggled to get them to understand when they were young, and for them to recant that challenge with their child and their understanding, finally getting it. That light bulb finally goes off over their head, what I was trying to say. So I would say to young men that once it gets better, there's no greater reward than to be blessed to have children that are productive in society and whatever fields they choose, and to honor and to respect you as their father, the provider, and a man who had the wherewithal to stay.
Thank you, Tyrone.
I guess if I would, I'd have to say, being with 5 girls, 1 boy, um, the thing that I would say the most to fathers is work with the mothers, whether
Mm,
it's your spouse or your friend or just your baby mama, to work with your spouse to help raise those kids together. Her opinion, her beliefs can be just as important as yours, and vice versa. That you have to understand, if you talk about a village,
mm,
the village starts with the parents.
yes.
Parents, plural.
Cool.
And for those who are blessed enough to have both parents still alive, and for both those parents that are still alive and have children together, put aside your own selfish needs and wants and think about what's best to propagate
Mm,
your beliefs and what's right and what's wrong, and to make the world better. Because jointly, you know, two can do better than one when they're working together. If you only got one that's working in one direction and the other one's going in the opposite direction because they're mad or angry or whatever about their own relationship, that's being pretty selfish. So you have to give up the selfishness and try to raise kids together. Whether you get mad at that, I don't care. Again, if it's your spouse, you get angry with them. Don't use the kids as pawns to to deal with your significant other or the baby mama, whatever it may be. Think about it's for the child. So do what's best for them as a father. Period.
And I'm going to say something on that, Doc. I had a friend who I was in a conversation with this, and he said something to me that has stuck with me. And he said to me that we were talking about whether or not our children, as young black men, had been unlawfully pulled over or had a negative situation with the police. And I said to him that in talking to mines, they had not. And he said something to me that rings with me. He said, I'm not surprised because if your children grew up seeing your interaction with you and your wife, then their level of respect would almost assure that they didn't have that edge when they got pulled over. They didn't have that attitude when something happened.
They had respect for others.
They have respect for others, and that's what you're talking about. That when you have the village starting with those two parents, and the children have an opportunity to see the engagement between those parents, they will mimic that. If what they see is positive, they will mimic that. If what they see is negative, they will mimic that.
And so will your grandchildren. If they
Yes,
see grandma and granddad, whether they're together, not together, but able to communicate, no animosity because you cheated on me or you whatever it might be, they have to remember it's about the child.
yes,
And that's the one thing I gave my mom credit for, regardless of what my dad did. She made sure we understood that was my dad. that was my father, okay, and that I was going to respect him, okay, would irrespective of what we thought
Yes.
the relationship between the two of them was. That's your father. You respect him, you honor him, and we'll see how life goes at that point.
I think that's some great advice, and I appreciate that. And I thought it was important to ask you all that question because when we talk about
It was.
troubling times and building, keep really strengthening the parent-child relationship, and knowing that the father does have a role in it, even if he's not in the home with them. I like how you both spoke of the importance of the way what I gathered from it is that you do, first of all, you do have a role in raising your children. And for the moms out there, one of my friends, I used to always tease with her on Father's Day. I call her or text her and say Happy Father's Day, right? Because she didn't have, unfortunately, father for her children that she hoped to have, but she was making it work, right? And so I always like giving a shout out to the men who step up as mentors, for example, and knowing and filling in the gap for those families who might not have that father figure present, and really encouraging people to continue doing that. We started out the show out. I talked about the Convention on the Rights of the Child, and we had some discussion on the rights of children. And I have to remember and to also state that, and Dr. Kane, you alluded to it, that the rights of children vary from where you are. In different countries, it means one thing. In different states, and even in different households, people have varying opinions. I think the essence of what you both talked about is respect.
Yeah.
Respect is at the foundation of, you respect that the child has rights, but you also respect your role as a parent when it comes to having that positive parent-child relationship, and to model the behavior that you want your children to know, which is acceptable as far as you and your family structure is concerned. So when it comes to those things that they're competing against, be it gang or social media, those outside influences, it's just stuff to them, because it's not something. I know that's what I ask my people and my young people that I've been around. Have you heard of gangs? Yeah, but it's nothing I ever wanted to be a part of, right? Because that's not something that they saw in their family, and knowing that they saw a different. They were focused on. They had their eye on their future. What do I want to do? For my future, to have the type of family that I want, be it whatever it is. Okay. And one thing, by the way, that the pandemic has done is, when we talk about the direction that people have gone, it's made people change and self-reflect. I think they
Yeah.
may have been doing one career and just decided that takes away too much from my family. I had to shelter. I had to stop. The world stopped when the pandemic was at the height, right? A lot of places were closed. People actually got a chance to spend more time with their families, and they enjoyed it. And so they've made some career changes and have decided that I want to be able to spend more time with my family. So I'm choosing a different route. Young people are doing ride share businesses. They're doing, and they're, just all sorts of things. As Tyrone talked about, those social media influencers, they're online. They've created such a huge following that they're now making money off of that, playing video games. So I like that people are exploring their passion. And I think that's the thing, to nurture what we want as parents, for parents to nurture what their children want, and don't just be stuck on and say, oh, that's not a job. That's not a real job. Oh, yeah, it's a real job nowadays, making real money, as long as it's legal, right? It's a
Absolutely.
real
Right.
job. So guess what?
Legal,
Hour. We've reached the
legal and
hour.
right and righteous in his nature. But go ahead.
Yeah, we've reached the hour of our show, and I'm not going to treat you all different than I do any other guests. I would like to close our show as we talk about the topic for tonight, making the parent-child relationship work in troubled times. Tyrone, I'd like to start with you. What are your final thoughts for on this topic for tonight?
Well, my final thoughts are this. First of all, I'm going to start by saying it's always a pleasure to have the opportunity to come from behind the scenes. It is important for our listeners to understand that, it's been a pleasure as I continue to work with Ms. Johnson Turner and Dr. Rogers Kane. But we have a lot of conversations before we bring a subject to the forefront. And we often laugh and have a good time as we do that. This is a episode that came within me. So of course I had a little bit more to say, and they allowed me to come from behind the scenes. But here's what I want to leave with. There are a couple of things that I heard said in the way that I think are really important for us to understand as we talk about troubled times. Let's talk about this here and simply gangs. And I'm not going to get deep into it, but gangs. There are very few, if any, gangs that recruit. People go to gangs. So parenting or the lack of parenting pushes our children into gangs. Gangs don't come get them. That's a misnomer. Children are looking to belong, and so they therefore seek out places that will belong. The gangs make them be a part of a family. Parenting, as I look at it, and I believe based on things I've read and have the pleasure of having three kids, is about helping your child become a productive citizen by teaching them respect through love and understanding, to give them a birth of experience, but be there to guide them in their path to making the right decisions. One of the things that we told our sons, but we always have, is that you always have love at 4160. You go out into the world and the world does what it does and it shoots you down. But when you come here, you always have love. You need to know that, you need to understand that, and you need to rely on that. And our goal was to give them the power to go out and experiment, take their bumps and bruises, come home, recover, and go back. And so I say to all those who are listening and all those who are willing to hear that parenting is a process by which we help our young folks become productive citizens in the society that is upon us today, not yesterday, but today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tyrone. That was awesome. Dr. Kane, what are your final thoughts on tonight's topic as we close on making the parent-child relationship work in troubled times?
Well, as usual, I always appreciate when Tyrone comes from behind the scene. He has some very intuitive insight as far as it relates to his thoughts. They can be very provoking. So we much appreciate Tyrone coming from behind the scene. He pretty much expressed a lot of the love and effect that love and expressions of love that we need to show our kids. So I'm going to take a little bit different route to add on to what he said, and that is, we've said parents, parents, parents. We have to remember that's a pluralistic term,
Mm,
and it takes collaboration with the parents to help raise a child or children. And the one thing that really, and not that I was not a collaborator with raising my kids, but when I start back in the early 90s or the late 80s, early 90s, I did a lot of work with our naval, our military, and particularly over at the Navy base. And a lot of the fathers, especially because it was a whole lot of men at that time, not as many women sailors, but there are a lot of women sailors these days. But a lot of the fathers went off on 6-month cruise, or sometimes it might be a year cruise or whatever it may be. And they came home and automatically want to reestablish the relationship as being the man of the house and forgot the role that that woman played while they were gone. They were the man and the woman of the house. They were responsible for everything. And when the men came back and forgot the role that those women played the whole time that they were gone, not that they intentionally disrespected them, but the kids were confused
Yes.
because they ran to mom for everything because dad was not there. And I did a lot of trying to teach those dads exactly what I'm saying to you now. You haven't been there for 6 months. Quite naturally, they're going to go to mom when they want something or they have questions about something. Or even if you give an opinion that no, I don't want you to have it, they may still go to mom because mom had been the mom and dad during your absence. They were the final words. So you have to respect your wife's opinion. Don't get mad at her because you were absent. I was absent in medical school. I was absent in residency to a great degree. So when that occurred with my spouse, I did learn from those Navy individuals and saw, oops, I'm about to screw up. Let me step back because she's been the one that's been there all this time. While I might have been on call every third night or doing this, whatever it might have been, she was there. And so I had to respect her for raising those kids to whatever level it was at that time. And I want to, I still give to this day that is because of her and all of her efforts that our kids are who they are today. I had some influence as a father, but she had a whole lot of influence as a father and a mother. So I just want to make sure I pay respect to the role that women play in a household.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you, Tyrone, and thank you, Dr. Kane. I think tonight's topic, although we didn't have our guest on as planned, hopefully we can bring him on. But I think we did a pretty good job.
Yes.
So thank
Yes.
you all for talking about your personal experiences. I'm not a parent. I thought I was going to be struggling with this, but I think I can pat myself on the shoulder that I've had some influence, some positive influence on some children in my life. But I'd like to just end with hang in there, parents. Know that we know that is troubling times. We know that, as Tyrone says, trouble has been throughout many of our lives, but we will get past it. And don't be too ashamed to ask for help if you need it, to seek it. If you don't know where to go, call your school, the guidance counselor, call your doctor. They will tell you. The state of Florida, regardless of what you may hear about them, the Florida Department of Children and Families, it still remains a good resource. I also mentioned to you about the Partnership for Child Health, Center for Child Rights, Family Support Services, a lot of great organizations out there that you can tap into. But also, speaking of tapping into, don't forget to tap into next week's Pause for the Truth as we talk about what's really going on. One topic that we would like to discuss this month, so if any of you have an interest, is it's Black Music Month, right?
Mhm.
It's not something that we've talked about in the past. We try to change up every now and then. If you can join us as a guest to talk about Black Music Month, please email us at Tyrone. What's our email address?
info@pauseforthetruth.com.
Thank you. That's info@pauseforthetruth.com. If you'd like to join us as we talk about Black Music Month before the end of June. Thank you for tuning in and good night, everyone. Go
One
ahead.
thing before you get off, we want to make sure people know that we will list quite a few of those organizations you mentioned on our website if they want to go and try to find access for additional help. So we list those organizations all the time. Go to our website and they'll be able to help find some of those places, websites and web addresses that you referred to earlier.
I'm glad you said
Absolutely.
that, Dr. Kane, because I would like to really for people to do their homework and Google the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. Very interesting when you look at the different articles about that. Thank you all and good night.
Night.
Good night.